How about Alabama, Texas A&M, the Crimson Tide, 2.5-point favorites. Texas A&M coming off a wild game. I mean, sunrises, sunsets. Texas A&M and Arkansas play weird games in Jerry World, but this is a Texas A&M team that I think has been moving forward with some real momentum from the loss to Miami, the embarrassing loss to Miami, to be frank. Do we think that the Aggies – well, let's start from this. What aspect of this game, because we do want to sort of peel apart the matchup, what aspects of this game do you think matter the most? Where will it be won?
I think pass protection is going to be key, but also pass rate. So both of these teams have struggled this year to protect the passer. Alabama recently has found a pretty good way to remedy this, which is just don't pass, right? They're like, oh, you know what? We're just going to run Jalen Milroe a bunch and throw some play action stuff against Ole Miss. And I believe they threw, 12 passes against Mississippi State, and most of those were, screens, some play action stuff. Basically just said, we're just not going to do any drop back passing. It's like a pitcher in baseball be like, all right, I really only have a good fastball on the team. Just throw it. We don't want to see that junk slider up there. We'll live with the results. A&M's pass rush has been fantastic. Can A&M force Alabama into a game state in which they have to pass, right? Two-score lead, end of half situations. And if so, how does that look? Because Bama's run blocking the last 2 weeks has actually been fairly okay. I think part of that is because you get better angles when you're that dedicated to running the quarterback. But can Alabama pass protect if they have to? On the flip side, A&M has really nice weapons, and they have not pass protected super well. Bama's defense looks awesome to me. The matchup of A&M's receivers on Bama's DBs is really pretty fascinating. How much will Bama have to blitz to get home? And if they don't have to blitz much, I think Bama has a pretty nice spot here. But on the flip side, can you really trust this Alabama offense on the road? We've seen some horrific performances from them so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to with me looking at this one, because as you mentioned, this Aggies defense is very disruptive. And the Alabama offensive line, which is something we've harped on for a long time, I think that having Milroe back there and just having him established and using him as more of a runner has really helped that offensive line in the run blocking aspect of it. But the pass blocking is still an absolute mess. And this Aggies team, it leads the nation in sack rate at 14.8%. And if you look at havoc rate, which for our listeners who aren't familiar is basically the percentage of plays that have a tackle for loss, forced fumble, interception, pass breakup, or a sack, they are leading the nation in that as well at 23.8% of their snaps. So nearly a quarter of their snaps on defense are ending in some kind of havoc play. That is not a great sign for me if I'm Alabama and I have Jalen Milroe standing back there in the pocket behind that offensive line on the road where things can be a little shaky, especially in a loud environment like that one. So the question for me is, does A&M want to bring that kind of pressure? Because they have a very high sack rate, despite the fact that they don't get a ton of pressure overall, which tells me either they're very, very good at disguising their blitzes and getting home, or the quarterbacks they've played have played a role in that sack rate. But I think you can get to Milroe if you bring the pressure. But on the other end, this is an Alabama offense that really struggles when it gets into the red zone. So do you want to maybe sit back, force Milroe to beat a zone and make those kind of decisions on the road, keep him in the pocket, and then take your chance in the red zone where he has really struggled to be effective as a quarterback? So that's going to be an interesting thing from the Texas A&M defense and DJ Dirk, and I'm really interested in seeing what kind of choice they make there.
It's an interesting point you bring up, Tom, because I think in this game, most of us would agree that low scoring favors Alabama, and that A&M would probably try to get out and run, not run the football, but run a little higher tempo, try to play a little higher scoring game. However, A&M's defensive backs were horrendous against Miami, right? There were guys that they fell down. Some people will tell you they slipped on the logo. I don't know about that. But there were wide open Miami guys pretty consistently. And Miami's receiving core has improved this year. I don't know if it's that improved. We'll see as they start to play some real opponents. And we just don't know about A&M secondary, because Arkansas's receivers are pretty mid, and obviously their passing game is non-existent. They've played ULM, which runs like a modified Bryles type thing, but it's ULM, and New Mexico, which is running what UAB ran for all those years under Bill Clark and Brian. So we don't really know how good the A&M secondary is. I expect that A&M will do exactly what you said. Sit back, because Bama can still hit an explosive or two.
Yeah.
Can they hit 3 or 4 passes underneath consistently? A&M's front is absolutely for real to me. I mean, you get Walter Nolan, Shamar Turner is freaking awesome. You got a lot of really, really good players in that A&M front. The back end, not so much. So I think you try to protect your back end with numbers, and you try to let your studs up front win and maybe force some field goals there in the red zone. But that does lead to a slower pace game, a lower scoring game potentially. So it's sort of a weird dichotomy. Like, do you want to try to get in the score fest, or do you want to try to – I think you probably still sit back. Durkin is also not known as a high blitz guy. So I can't imagine he'd break that tendency in this ball game, but he could. Who knows?
Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams, man, that's underwhelming from what we've seen from the Alabama ground game outside of what Jalen Milroe can go out there and do. You know, like workman-like from every now and then. I think they're both averaging around like 5 yards per carry, sure, but you know, it doesn't seem as though that is a dominant group. And I know that was an issue last year as well with Alabama. And so I'm really looking at that group to see whether or not they're going to be able to get anything, any kind of consistency going against a very good Texas A&M front. Also from the injury report side of things, mostly healthy, but I will say, so Evan Stewart, little bit knocked up in the Arkansas game. I think it's an ankle. Jimbo says this week he should be good to go. I have full expectation that Evan Stewart is going to be out there. I'm not expecting he will be a late scratch.
Well, Chip, you're either really knocked up, or you're fully knocked up, or you're not.
Oh, knocked up, knocked out. I don't think he's going to be like fully knocked out. But if he's
are we going nicked up, or are we going knocked out?
Nicked up or knocked out, knocked up, nicked out, nicked up. Listen, it's an ankle. I'm sure he's going to go ahead and give it a go. But could be something to keep an eye on if that thing gets aggravated. You took a little bit of a late hit and you had to go walk it off. But something to keep an eye on, as Stewart is, for my money, like one of the most important skill players that Texas A&M has on this offense right now. And when you've got a defense, especially a defensive front that can cause problems, man, Max Johnson would love to know that he's got Evan Stewart there to be able to throw a potential 50-50 ball up to, because of how much of a higher percentage chance he gives you of being able to make that be a reception.
You mentioned Alabama's running backs and the run game being kind of lackluster, and Bud touched on this a little bit too. Like, if you look at the raw numbers, Alabama's running backs don't look great. If you look at the raw numbers, Texas A&M's running backs, hey, Le'Veon Moss is averaging 6 yards a carry. Amari Daniels is averaging 5.5. But if you look at it from the EPA standpoint, Alabama ranks 77th in EPA per rush. A&M is 117th. Neither one of these teams has run the ball very well all year. It's going to be, will either of them be able to in this game? Also, turnovers. A&M's turned the ball a lot. I mean, some of it was the Miami game and just kind of weird stuff, but they have turnover rate of 11.7%. The national average is 10.7. That ranks 77th. It's like, I know you're at home in this, but this is a huge game. You need to take care of the football in this one if you're going to beat Alabama.
Any other final expectations here?
Is there a number we feel like Bama has to get to? Because I'm almost certain that Petrino is going to scheme up like a shot or two, right? Like if Bama
Alabama needs 24. Alabama needs 24 points.
I was going to say 27.
Yeah, but
depending on tempo, yes, I could see that.
Like totals, and by the way, like speaking of turnovers, this might be hey, Alabama's defense, we need you to go out there and get us a score, or at least get us a short field kind of situation. Dallas Turner off the outside, strip sack, fall on the ball. Now all of a sudden life becomes much easier for Jalen Milroe when you're not asking him to march 75 yards. Over under is around 47. So we are looking at a game that should be decided in the 20s on Thursday. We'll see if anybody makes this one of their week 6 locks.
Speaking of that, I mean, Bama's what, 2.5 right now?
Yeah.
Let's assume like full home field, obviously. it would be like Bama 9.5, Bama 10 in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, probably around there.
Bama was just 6.5 against Ole Miss. Bama was what, 7.5 against Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on.
Something feel off there?
Bud, can you run that back, please?
Sure. So
don't make Chip do great math in his brain.
All right. So Bama's a 2.5-point favorite, right?
Yeah.
In college,
I understand the like comparative, like what. So
sure. Like so for the chat, let's take them from College Station to a neutral site.
Right.
We'll give Bama back like 3.5 or 4. So that's going to take it up to 6.
Right.
Right. And then going in, it's big time game, full crowd, full environment. Going back to Tuscaloosa, we're going to go from that 6.5 number to 9.5, 10, adding in the home field, because you lose the home field when you go to the neutral, and then the other team gains the home field when they go to their home field. So when I say on the show, like flip home, right, you're generally adding somewhere between like 6 and 8 to the spread, unless it's a MAC game, and then I don't use any home field.
Yeah. All right. So disrespectful. Come on. You don't walk into the glass.
Well, unless you think bus travel is like maybe if we knew they're got like a whatever the really bad bus brand is now.
You've seen Eastern Michigan. Come on now. All right. So you're saying that if Alabama not blew out, but if Alabama beat Ole Miss handily, covering that spread, then how does that impact your expectation for the Texas A&M? Like, what feels off?
Well, it just, if you go just on ratings, basically A&M is being rated behind Ole Miss and behind Texas. At the same time, I think perception plays into this quite a bit. So we did not know how iffy Bama's offense would be when they were playing Texas. That's why they were slightly more than a touchdown. However, we got Bama really cheap against Ole Miss, right? Because we had just seen the USF game and it looked like a complete disaster. So obviously, if they played again today, Bama would not be 7 over Ole Miss. It would be 10, maybe a little more, depending, regardless of what Ole Miss LSU just did, whatever sport that was. But it is I do play that game in my head. I'm like, this team really like why is something off here? Is one of these teams significantly better or worse than maybe we thought of at the time? I don't know.
If I'm looking for any overreaction, it comes from it comes really more from the fact that Arkansas gifted Texas A&M a lot in that game, and like credit Texas A&M's defense, the group that we started, praising at the beginning of this big game breakdown for creating that kind of havoc. But it was also a lot of short fields for that Texas A&M offense, a lot of good advantageous field position where 34-22, it was a kind of, I wonder if that game, makes Texas A&M look a little bit more dominant, and maybe you're a little bit more confident in the Aggies coming out of it, thanks to the way that the turnovers went in that game.